I wanted to first welcome everybody and thank you for the time that you are going to spend. Let's just kind of dive right in here a little bit and get into this. First, I want to introduce myself. My name is Victor Wolowec. I am with Hilscher North America. I'm the channel and sales manager for the package solution products that you're going to hear a little bit about today. As we move on, I wanted to talk a little bit about those. I think from the description of the webinar, you found some interest from that. So let's go through an agenda of what we're going to cover today. I'll tell you a little bit about Hilscher and its start and why the technology that we use is so important to achieve the solutions that we have. One of the things also as we go into the solutions that we have, I've always been told if you want to present a solution, you first have to present the problem. So we're going to go through that, and I call this Connectivity 101, use cases. So we're going to go through a handful of use cases, and we're going to see also if any of these maybe are familiar to you. Then we'll go into some gateways and converters and how they work. Go through basically the solutions to those use cases that you're going to see. And then also the solutions overview, the gateways, the connector-based solutions, and the simple SCADA solutions that we have. Lastly, we're going to then cover questions. So that brings me to the point where if you do have some questions, go ahead and send them in. For those of you that have already sent in some questions due to our technical difficulty in the beginning, you obviously know how to do that. But if you do have any questions, we're going to go ahead and cover that through a question and answer session that Jane will host for us. Jane is actually my co-host here this morning, and she'll come on at that time to help me with those questions. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in. First, wanted to tell you a little bit about Hilscher. Hilscher is a leader in industrial communications. We've been around since the mid-1980s. Hans-Jürgen Hilscher is the founder and owner of this company. We are privately held. We are a German company, and really our focus is on technology. Hans-Jürgen Hilscher took an approach where it was build it and they will come, and he was very focused on the technology, and you're going to hear a little bit about what that technology can give you. Our focus is really on industrial communication, so everything you're going to see here is industrial communications focused and factory automation focused. And really at the end of the day, our package is complete and total, from the chips all the way up to package solutions and even engineered solutions. So you're going to see a little bit about how Hilscher is able to provide a full, complete solution for you. We are a global company. The U.S. is the largest wholly owned subsidiary of Hilscher, but we have a large presence throughout the globe. In all continents, and we focus on providing that technology wherever we are at. So we are global, but we also focus locally. Here in the U.S., we do have a local presence in the Chicago area where we basically are fully self-sufficient. So which means we have tech support, and we will be. We have tech support, inventory, everything that you need locally. So we strive to be focused here in the U.S. and provide our own support here in the U.S. So let's just drive right into the jungle. I like this slide because it really kind of gives you a good feel for the landscape of what is out there. Obviously, since the early 90s, late 80s, when things started to migrate from analog to field bus, a jungle started growing over the whole communications area. So a lot of field buses. And then Ethernet came on, and then there's a lot of Ethernet protocols starting to come on, and suddenly you see this really overgrown mess or a landscape here that really is part of what a lot of you are really dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Some of you are even tasked with the goal of actually trying to pull these things together, pull these networks together, pull these devices together, which actually comes to an interesting question. And our first poll, I wanted to just kind of get a feel for what networks are installed in your manufacturing automation system. So I'm going to throw a poll out there, and if you would, go ahead and vote on which networks are currently that you are working with, so I can kind of get a feel for where is the focus right now that you see for you. So went ahead and launched it, so you should see actually a poll on your screen. Go ahead and choose one or any or all, and I'll close this up here in just a few seconds, but I wanted to see, it looks like there's a lot of people already voting, and oh, there's some interesting results. Looks like we've got a couple very strong ones, and then a middle of the road, and then some small ones. So a couple more seconds here, and I'll close the poll. All right. So let's take a look at these results. I find these interesting. As you can see there, the results show that Modbus and Modbus TCP are the highest, with a close second being DeviceNet and Ethernet IP. So you see, and I think that's fairly typical for the U.S. market, with a number 3 being Profibus and Profinet. If I had to guess it, this is probably the distribution that you'd see. And then lastly, you see EtherCAT and Circos. So very interesting results, and again, that really re-emphasizes the issue that there are a lot of protocols out there, and how do you achieve those, especially if you're a system integrator or a machine maker, and you've got a market out there that really is demanding interoperability between these protocols, and how do you achieve that? So let's move on there. Move on from this slide, and this is where Hilscher comes in. Hilscher has a technology called netX that really tames the protocol jungle. The netX chip, which is a Hilscher proprietary chip, was designed and is manufactured by Hilscher. And it is a real multi-protocol platform, which means that it can hold multiple protocols on it at the same time, which means really at the end of the day, that means that we can pretty much do everything on the chip, whatever protocol it is, and then it becomes just an issue of I/O mapping. The chips are scalable. We actually have multiple chips for depending on what application that you need, so it's not a one-size-fits-all, which also means that it's future-proof. And as we move forward, you'll see that we also have IoT-ready applications, OPC UA, MQTT available as well. This also makes us a one-stop shop, because we can also, we're going to be talking about package solutions, but really our start is in the chips and the modules. And for those of you device manufacturers out there that want to embed technologies, we do have that technology, and we have the expertise, and we have all the stacks and firmware to achieve what you need. So it's really a one-stop shop. You're not going to have to mix and match hardware with firmware and anywhere on the market. So at the end of the day, we really provide a complete ecosystem from the protocol stacks and the chips or boards, but we also have evaluation boards, utilities, development tools, and even training for you as you go through that. So we're able to provide basically everything that you need, whether it's something that works right out of the box or something that you wanted to develop or implement into your own product. One of the things we're going to be talking about today, as I mentioned, are the package solutions. So on the right-hand side, we're going to get into gateways and proxies. There on the top, these two are our gateways. We also have connector-based solutions, what we're going to talk about as well today. We have PCI cards, also visualization products here, and then lastly, IoT products as well. And then in addition, as I mentioned, we also have all the embedded solutions, which we won't be covering this morning, but if you have any questions on that, feel free to contact us for any types of applications that you may have. So, as I mentioned before, whenever you want to present a solution, first you want to present the problem. And the problem is that there are a lot of different types of use cases. So I'm going to go through a handful of these use cases and see which ones potentially even which ones are more familiar to you guys as well. So let's move on to the use case A, segment coupling. Can you actually share information, share data between two separate segments? Completely isolated controllers and devices running in parallel, but what if you need to actually share data or send data across the two segments? Yes, you can. And as you can see there, you can do it with one of our gateway solutions there. Use case B, combine existing network with new network. Especially for you systems integrators out there. You are almost on a daily basis asked by your customers, by the way, I'd like to add this new line to my factory, but maybe my standard has changed. So now rather than controllers from brand A, we want to have controllers from brand B. And we want to have this new line communicate to our old line. And at that point, the systems integrators are hit with a great monumental task. How do you get these products to talk to each other? How do you put mixed with the new products with the old products? And that is something that is still very, very doable and very possible to do. Use case C, replace existing controller but maintain existing network. Controllers and technologies are being updated on a daily basis, it seems. Newer features, newer technologies are coming online, but the fact is that you want to take advantage of those, but maybe the devices that are on your factory floor, you want to continue to reuse. There have been even vendors out there that have launched full campaigns that said, hey, you can reuse your devices by installing our new controller, and you don't have to do a full rip and replace. So in this case, it will show you a way that you can actually continue to use your older devices, even put in a new line, put in a new controller, and with a gateway in between, actually reuse the older devices that you see there. Use case D, programming maintenance of legacy Siemens controllers via network connections. For those that are familiar with Siemens controllers, especially the ones prior to Ethernet coming on board, if you're familiar with the MPI port on the face of those controllers, that's a serial port. That's where you would program and that you would do maintenance on the controller. It's a serial port, which means that it can't go long distances. Usually, if you had to do anything to it, you had to be local to the device, and it was very cumbersome and difficult to do. We have connector-based solutions that allow you to actually now take those older legacy Siemens controllers and network them to the point where you could actually do all that programming and all that maintenance remotely. In this case here shows an application where it was actually put on a cellular modem, and that connection was sent a very long distance away. And then lastly, use case E, remotely accessible network visualization. This is for those folks that would really like to have some sort of visualization on either a Profinet or Modbus network, or even on their older Siemens controllers, but really don't want to spend the $15,000, the $10,000, the $20,000 for a full SCADA package. We have the technologies and we have solutions that allow you to do that for simply $1,000 and be able to access that visualization through any web browser. And I'll show you a little bit about that. But before we do that, what I wanted to do before we hit the rest of the agenda is launch another poll here. And the question here is, what is your biggest networking headache? You saw those use cases there, and the options here are going to show those use cases. I wanted to see if there are any of those that actually were familiar to you. Are those actually applicable to you? And see if that's something that that is interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll, and you should see that. Go ahead and vote on those. I'll give you a few moments here to vote on those. And it looks like the poll is going out. All right, we've got people voting. Give you a few more seconds. Oh, great results. Great results. Looks like it's not pretty similar to the last one, last poll that we launched. So another few seconds just before the polls close. All right, let's go ahead and close that and let's share that. Fantastic results. As you can see there, the results show that programming and maintaining legacy systems is important. And really that's a lot of what we do as a business. Replacing PLCs while maintaining I/O, remote access of network visualization come in at a number 2, and then a number 3, combining existing new networks. So you can see the needs are there, and they're pretty widespread, and very interesting results. Thank you for voting. So let's move on. So let's on the agenda, next thing is gateways and converters and how they work. When I first started with Hilscher, one of the things that I found that many customers struggled with at times was what do gateways actually do, and how do gateways interact with controllers and devices and such in the network, and one of the things that you know, kind of simple understanding blocks here are that masters talk to slaves and slaves talk to masters, and whether you call it master slave, client server, scanner adapter, controller device, whatever you want to call it, it's basically the same thing. Usually there's only one master in the network speaking to one or more slaves. Sometimes the network can be just slaves, and they kind of work independently from each other. And then lastly, gateways are inversely matched to the network. And this point is sometimes missed by many, and we do get the periodic question to our tech support on that. And let me show you that point here. So for instance, we've got a controller, and let's just say it's a Profinet controller, and we want to take that controller and speak to a network of, and let's just say DeviceNet devices out on there, conveyors or whatever you want to call it. So the Profinet is a master, is a controller, Profinet, and then the devices are slaves. They're DeviceNet products. That means that number one, Profinet can't talk to DeviceNet. So how do we overcome that hurdle? And that's basically, we do that by putting in this gateway, and this block diagram represents perhaps one of our gateways. So as I mentioned before, slaves talk to masters and masters talk to slaves. So in this type of network, our gateway needs to actually become the slave to the master. So that means the gateway will actually be a Profinet slave, and then on the other side, it will be a DeviceNet master. which basically is counterintuitive to what you would think your network is, because in context of your network, you've got a Profinet master and you've got device net slaves. But in actuality, your gateway needs to be configured the exact opposite as a Profinet slave and a device net master. So that's when I say that gateways are actually counterintuitive to how your network is, because our gateway needs to actually be the slave to the master and the master to the slave. So hopefully that helps you there as well. So let's move on. So let's go through a solutions overview. I'm going to talk about kind of two categories of our gateways and connector-based gateways. On the left-hand side, you see there our netTAP 151, 150. These are our DIN rail mounted solutions. And on the right-hand side are our connector-based solutions, our netLINK MPI and our netLINK PROXY. First off is our netTAP 100 and 151. These are our multi-node gateways, fully featured and functioning. They are client-server, master-slave, which means they can act as either, so they can be configured in any which way that you want to. The processing time is actually quite fast, 5 to 10 milliseconds. Which is pretty doable for pretty much any motion control application that you have. There's been very few that have not been able to take that kind of speed, and honestly, there aren't too many gateways, if any, that actually are as fast or faster than that. Our NetX chip really has a lot of horsepower to do that conversion. One thing is very important here, and that is everything that you're going to see here that I'm going to talk about has one single configuration tool. Even those things that I'm not going to talk about, and that is the chips and the PCI cards and everything. Everything is configured with one configuration tool, and that's our SciCon.net, which means that once you have the hardware, then you have access to and have the flexibility to any protocol that you're able to put onto that. Again, being only limited by the specific hardware, which means that if you've got on one side of the gateway, you've got a Profibus connector, you're pretty much limited to just Profibus. But if on the other side, you've got an Ethernet jack, at that point, you can pretty much put any Ethernet protocol that you want on that side, whether it be Ethernet IP or Profinet or anything, which makes then these two packages very flexible. On the left-hand side, you see those are our field bus to Ethernet converters, the netTAP 100. But on the right side is our real-time Ethernet to real-time Ethernet converter. The commissioning and configuration are very easy. I'll show you some screenshots here in a moment. But one thing is interesting is that then it really lends itself to many protocol conversions. Lastly, and the thing I want to talk about before I move on is our serial port for configuration. As you can see here, there is a USB port. So when you get, and even before you get our gateway, you can go ahead and download, and I'll show you some of that here towards the end. You can download our SciCon.net software. That SciCon.net software loads on your laptop or your computer, and enables you then to select the protocols that you need to, and then also do the I/O mapping. Once you're complete with all that, that project then gets loaded into the gateway using that USB port. And we actually even provide the USB cable for you for that. As you can see there, the protocols are actually bi-directional, so you can set up either side as a master or slave. And then one last thing I wanted to bring to your attention is this little SD card slot. That is very interesting for two reasons. Number one, it's great for quick swap outs for failed units on the field. The SD card actually holds the configuration of your gateway, so that if you needed to swap out a gateway, you would put the new gateway in line. Obviously, you would have to disconnect the connectors, and then there's a power connector at the bottom. Put in the new gateway, throw in the SD card slot in there, and before you power it up, once you power it up after putting in the SD card, it will look for that card, and if it finds a card there, it will actually burn that configuration onto the unit. Once it does that, it's up and running and ready to go. And both our netTAP 100 and netTAP 151, our fully featured gateways, have that functionality. Lastly, I wanted to bring to your attention the thing that that is very important between the 100 and 151 and the 50, which I'll talk about, is that these are multi-node gateways, which means that it can do truly full network-to-network conversions. So this is if you're looking to connect segments, looking to put multiple devices onto one controller, and they speak different languages, these are the devices that can handle that. So let's move on here. This I call my eye chart. Literally, I don't mean it for you to read it, but it's there to see really the impressiveness about the number of conversions that we can handle. So when customers look at our products, I come down to the fact and say, we can take any of these protocols and we can convert them to any of these protocols. And as you can see there, there's masters and slaves on all of that. In some cases, you see blanks. And in those cases, those are actually filled in by our netTAP 151, which is our real-time Ethernet to real-time Ethernet protocol. So, and this is these are the blank fillers on that other matrix. Okay, so let's move on. The netTAP 50. We talked about the 100, 151, multi-nodes, fully featured. The netTAP 50 is our more economical single node gateway. We're talking about a third of the price of our multi-node device. And the idea here is that this is also still a DIN rail mounted device, but it's for a single node. And in this case, you also lose a little bit of the features. So you don't have the SD card slot. You also don't have that USB port, which then at that point you ask, how do I configure it? Well, you configure it through this Ethernet port, which means that there's a little, I call it a half step, and that is assigning an IP address. But still, you still use the same software to configure it. You just choose a netTAP 50 in the configuration software rather than the 100 or the 151. Field bus to Ethernet, field bus to serial, Ethernet to serial, single port supported networks, slave to slave, slave to masters. The performance on this is right around 20 milliseconds, which is a little bit slower, but still way up there as far as processing time. And the processing time, again, that when you're getting in that 5, 10, 15, 20 milliseconds processing time, that's usually pretty good for most motion applications. SciCon.net. This is a free software. It's downloadable off our website. You could even do that even as we speak. I don't recommend that, but maybe after we're done, you can go ahead and download it. And it is a piece of software that we provide free of charge, and it literally contains all the firmware that is used to configure all of our products. It is the same software, whether it be our gateways, our PCI cards, or even our modules. The same software is used to configure, which means that it's that same software that is used to put whatever protocol that you want onto that NetX chip. As you can see there, some of those screens actually may be familiar to you if you're familiar with some other ladder logic programming. And as I mentioned before, the process is literally 3 steps. Choose the protocol and whether it's a master or slave on one side, choose the protocol and whether it's a master or slave on the other. And then the third step being the I/O mapping. We have 2 ways to map the I/O. One is a true auto mapping, which basically does the simple 1-to-1, 2-to-2, or also you can do a drag and drop custom mapping, which this slide shows you. And literally it is very easy. Most configuration is done within 10-15 minutes. And then lastly, as you can see there, we've got a link to our Hilscher YouTube channel. On our Hilscher channel are all the tutorials that for all of our products on how to configure our devices. I highly recommend you go through those. I think for the netTAP 100, it's a 12 or 14-minute video, and very informative. It'll give you a kind of a heads up on how to go through that. So once you do it, literally it's a matter of minutes, and you'll be up and running. Okay, let's change gears here a little bit and move into our connector-based gateways, our netLINK MPI, netLINK SCADA, and the netLINK PROXY. First one will be our netLINK. Well, let's go through those. netLINK MPI and netLINK SCADA. The hardware is the same for those two. It's slightly changed by software, but the hardware is the same. And the netLINK PROXY is a little different. If you can see there on the back of the netLINK MPI, there is a pass-through connector. For the PROXY, there is not, and I'll show you why here in a moment. netLINK PROXY. This device has one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to put legacy Profibus devices onto new Profinet networks, which means that on this side, you would connect it to a Profibus device. Here's your Profibus connector. And on this side, you would actually connect to your Profinet network where your Profinet controller is. And then at that point, you would then have a 24-volt power supply that you would need to supply to it. In some cases, if you connect the Profibus connector to a live or a powered connection, it will actually take the power off of that. So depending on what you connect it to, you may not even need that 24-volt connector. This is a true proxy, which means it is a certified proxy by the PI organization. And by definition, with the proxy, the I/O has been preset. So the configuration on this is actually you take off literally all three steps, because the Profibus side is already set as Profibus and a master. The Profinet side is already set up as a Profinet and a slave, and the I/O mapping is already done for you. Some important features here. One of the questions I always get is, what about the GSDML file that I need for my Profinet controller? Well, that's something that is actually simply generated by our software, and I'll show you the steps here in a moment. So, commissioning the netLINK proxy. First step is the IP address setup. So you have to assign it an IP address. It's got an RJ45 port. You have to set an IP address for it. You do that through the Cycon.net software. Then at that point, the software itself will scan your Profibus network, and that is when it will actually collect the data off of your Profibus network to go ahead and create your GSDML file. Once it's created the GSDML file, it will export it, and then you take it and import it into your Profinet controller and set up the Profinet controller to see that device as literally another Profinet node on the network. So no longer do you technically have a Profibus device, but you have a Profinet device sitting on your Profinet network. Simple as that, easy as can be. Moving on, our netLINK 50 connectivity, as I mentioned before, this is a connector that is used to network older Siemens controllers that do not have Ethernet on them. Literally, you would plug it into the MPI port, as you can see there. Sometimes that MPI port has an HMI plugged into it, so we do provide a pass-through port so that you can still have your HMI plugged into the back of that connector and still use it. And then at that point, this is a TCP/IP output, and you can literally then network that controller to wherever you want. You put it on your local network, and at that point you have access to it back even to a control room. So all the programming, all the maintenance that you would normally do locally, you can do that. This is also very easily and used by service people. They keep the connector and a length of Ethernet cable in their bag, and they're able to do a lot of their programming from a more comfortable position than just standing in front of that controller. Lastly, that same hardware can also be used as a web server, and that web server will basically give you visibility to that older Siemens controller. So again, you've got an older Siemens controller, not a whole lot of stuff available for it, but you can now add visualization for $1,000, and that connector will literally become a web server for you. So that connector with our software will be will come together and become a SCADA system for you. So this will run with any older Siemens controller that has an MPI port, and the thing is, it will basically provide SCADA usability with but not as much of it. So for $1,000, there's not a whole lot of memory inside this device, and so you're able to get maybe 10 to 12 pages on this, and no more. So, but still, it's $1,000, and it gives you some very low-level visualization for it, and it's accessible via any web browser. We also have a solution for Modbus, both Profinet, RTU, and TCP. I'm sorry, Modbus, RTU, and TCP, and also Profinet. The hardware is a little bit different. It's a DIN rail mounted solution, or the DIN rail mounted box, and but it works in the same way. It becomes a web server, not a lot of memory in it, but it provides, along with the Defies software, a way for you to get visualization off of that network at a very low cost and with very little capability. The software itself enables you to create HTML pages without really knowing how to program HTML, which means that without having to learn HTML, you're able to provide really nice pages, and as I mentioned, about 10 to 12 pages off of that. The steps are pretty easy, as you can see from this. First, you select the server. So what kind of device is it? Is it going to be the netLINK, or is it going to be one of the other devices for one of the other networks? Then acquire the data points, so you can go find what data points you have and you address them. Design displays. The Defies software actually has quite a good library of graphics, and you can just literally drag and drop. So things such as valve positions, tank levels, start, stop, alarms, those types of things are all possible through the software itself. Then at that point, you generate the HMI. So you generate those pages in HTML, which is done through the software, and then you publish it and you're done. Literally then at that point, it's accessible via an HTTP page. So we come to the end of our presentation. On the handout section, you guys probably have seen it on the page here. You see a couple handouts there. First off is our Hilscher end user catalog. That shows not only the products that I showed here to you today, but also show some other products, some of our PCI cards and even some of our IoT products and our embedded technologies. If you have any questions on those, feel free to contact us on that. Also, there is a copy of my presentation for you to download should you wish. And then also just wanted to show you our Hilscher YouTube channel. As you can see here, this is what you will get when you go to our Hilscher YouTube channel. And if you wanted to do a tutorial, you can kind of click over, and for instance, this would be our netTAP podcast commissioning, and you can then click on it and you're ready to go there. Our website, Hilscher.com, is very informative. One of the things I wanted to show you here is our product finder. Our product finder allows you to actually select your products or find your products using a lot of different criteria. One of the most interesting criteria is the protocols. So you can see there the list of protocols that we deal with, and at that point you want to select, if you want whatever product it is, you can go through it by a protocol. And for instance, in this case, we can do a Profinet IO controller, and it'll select that for you that way. So at that point, hopefully, Jane, are you on board? I'm going to turn this over to you if there are any questions that might have come up.
Yes, I am. Thank you, Victor.
All right.
Perfect. And thank you, Victor, for your presentation. And thanks to our audience for bearing with us with a little bit of our audio issues there at the top of the webinar. So we have a couple of minutes left before we hit the end of our webinar hour. And we did have some questions come in during the course of the webinar, Victor. So one of the first of those was, does the gateway need to be purchased for the specific protocols needed?
Good question. And the answer is no, but it depends. Again, as I mentioned during the presentation, is the gateway hardware itself is only limited by the actual connector that is there. So, for instance, if one side needs to be Profibus, you have to order one that has a Profibus connector on there. If the other side's a Profinet, you just order one with an RJ45, and then at that point it becomes unlimited to. It doesn't have to be Profinet. It could be Ethernet IP. It could be EtherCAT, whatever you'd want on there. And the nice thing about it is that at that point it's bi-directional. So that Profibus side could be a master or a slave. Same with the Ethernet side, could be a master or slave. So flexibility on those, especially if you're using multiple, or for those integrators out there that use different ones all the time, it makes it very easy to work with.
Great, thank you. And for the protocol converters, can you tell me what kind of data is converted?
Good question. Didn't mention that, but the data that we're looking at, or the data that is being passed through those gateways, is cyclic data. So that is normal process data that is going through. In some cases, we do have availability for acyclic messaging. Contact us if you do have a need for those. But primarily, what we're looking at is cyclic data passing through those through those gateways.
Thanks. And Victor, earlier you were talking about masters, slaves, server, client. Someone has asked the question, how is a master license ordered, and when do I know that I need one?
Good question. This does also a little bit of a confusing point. Anytime that our gateway needs to act as a master in the network is when you will have to have a master license. Master licenses or master stacks are typically more expensive, and actually a lot of vendors don't actually have the master stacks for everything that they say that they handle. So you will find vendors out there that will say, yes, we do protocol X, Y, or Z, but in many cases that may mean that they only do slaves. In our case, we do masters and slaves for everything. The masters are usually more complicated stacks and more expensive to develop. In this way, there is a little bit of a premium, and that master license basically covers that premium. So anytime our gateway needs to act as a master in the network, you need to buy a master license. The only exception would be if it would be a Modbus device. If our gateway needs to be a Modbus master, no license is required due to the nature of Modbus. There really isn't kind of a formal master type of licensing protocol for that. So if our gateway needs to be master license needs to be ordered, except if it's Modbus is the rule of thumb.
Great, thank you. And I think we have time for one more question, and I'm going to ask you to address the question that came in on visualization products, because during our polling we had a lot of folks interested in that. So the question is, can you tell me more about Defies software, and what's the cost, and what are the system requirements?
Okay, good question. The Defies software actually comes as a package with the hardware for whatever protocol that you select, whether it be a Profinet or the one specific for the older Siemens controllers, or Modbus, TCP, or RTU. The price of the software is included with the full package, and the full package cost is right at $1,000. So there is no other additional cost. There is another graphics library that is available. I usually don't recommend that graphics library. It is expensive, and really at the end of the day, for what you're wanting to do, the library that's on the base package is fully self-sufficient. And if you're needing more, then maybe you would consider going to a higher level type of package. So so everything's included, and for $1,000, hardware and software.
Great, thank you. Well, that is going to about wrap up our time, Victor. If you submitted a question and we didn't have a chance to get to it, we will have somebody from the Hilscher organization contact you after the webinar to address your question. So I'll hand it back to you, Victor.
Well, thank you, Jane, and I really want to again thank you for everybody's time. You guys held in there for us, and I know that time is probably the most precious commodity, so I want to thank you for that. And if you really have any other needs or questions or requirements, feel free to contact us. There's my email address, there's my phone number. And if you need anything, feel free to reach out to us. So again, thank you, and hope you have a great rest of the day.